Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's The World This Week. We're in the company of Aaron Zaleski of The Daily Beast. We're also with Anne-Sylvaine Chassagny of The Financial Times, Stefan Siemens of Spiegel and Spiegel Online, and France 24's Brussels correspondent Maeve McMahon had to come into the office, so we pulled her in for some extra duty. Picture of the week comes from AFP photojournalist Jean-Philippe Chiazek. It's in France's second city, Lyon. A demonstrator on Thursday carrying flowers and a torch. This is, of course, the demonstrations against a labor reform bill that have been going on now for some 6 weeks. The demos, once again violent. It's 2.5 months of protests against the labor reform bill seem to be intensifying, if anything. The communist-aligned CGT trade union upping the ante by striking in the energy sector, shutting most of the nation's refineries, and picketing at nuclear power plants. 1/5 of the country's gas stations running low or empty, despite riot police breaking those picket lines, and the government dipping into its strategic fuel reserves. Where is the exit is the front page question that left-leaning daily Libération asks on its cover, with more strikes planned before and after the kickoff of the Euro 2016 football tournament on June the 10th. Anne-Sylvaine Chassagny, 63% of French citizens polled say they feel the strikes are justified.
Yes, the CGT has won the battle for public opinion, and that's what matters. You know, the CGT is not a popular union in France. You know, you ask people what they think about the CGT, they'll say they're rubbish. But you know,
they say they've got three times more members than any members of political parties.
Yeah, and that's correct. Actually, you know, they are right in saying that yes, there are only 8% of workers in France, you know, who belong to unions, and that's been declining. And you can argue, you know, that's a sign of weakness. But so are political parties when you look at memberships. And if you look at the CGT in terms of share of votes in professional elections, you know, the election that designate the workers' representatives in companies, they have, you know, 36% of the share, and they are still number one.
Why did they win this public opinion battle?
Because the government is super unpopular. The government, the François Hollande is the least popular president in France's post-war history. You know, with 13, approval ratings between 13% and 18%. You know, this law is coming at the end of his 5-year mandate. He's completely discredited. People, you know, so. In a way, the CGT is less unpopular than François Hollande. That's it.
But he's kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. François Hollande is giving the EU what they want. He's bowing really to their demands. He has to get his deficit and his debt in order to get in line.
Well, and he's promised voters that there'd be a lowering of unemployment. And,
of course. And also, he's the man who was in that summit in July face-to-face with Alexis Tsipras, telling him that he has to bring his books in order. So how on earth can he have credibility on the European field if he's not doing the same back at home?
Mm-hmm.
Stefan Siemens, we had over the weekend the start of these fuel shortages felt at the pump. They reached the Paris area midweek. Mm-hmm. Tuesday, I believe, was when we first started seeing lines outside of petrol stations. At that point in time, did you think that there would be a 30% increase in the number of people on the streets Thursday?
No, but nevertheless, we shouldn't overdo the numbers. I mean, there's a whole very French debate about how many people are in the street, and as always, the police basically that's half of what the unions say. So, but still, it's not. The pictures look frightening, right? You know, even though they're flowers, but they're flares and they're barricades and all this. You know, creates this idea of chaos in France and upheaval and revolution right around the corner. But nevertheless, it's not half as big as the massive demonstrations against the homosexual marriage 3 years ago. So let's not be, you know, create the wrong impression. CGT, the Communist Union, represents 2.6 of all the workers. The thing is that they have, at this point, found
But
the
they have
right
public
echo.
opinion.
Yeah, they have the right.
Why?
But it might, well, because people are against, as Aaron explained, they are straight against this law, which comes at the end of a 5-year or 4-year term, 1 year to run. And it was badly prepared. There was no dialogue with the unions. It was kind of pulled out of the hat. And then the dialogue only started afterwards. And all this gives in the public the feeling that this is a last stand for Hollande. The problem is how do you get out of it? And we had just the titles page of Libération. How to get out? There's no answer inside Libération on that question.
All right, the French finance minister Thursday morning suggesting tweaks to what is the essential bit of this bill, Article 2, whereby companies can override national collective bargaining deals with in-house agreements. But within the hour, the Prime...
6 minutes, I'm sorry.
Sorry, 6 minutes.
6 minutes.
Mr. Siemens had his stopwatch. The Prime Minister had called Michel Sapin to order.
Il est hors de question de changer le cap. Il peut toujours y avoir.
It is out of the question to change direction now.
Des modifications.
There can still be changes and improvements, but there will be no withdrawal of the text. And there will be no rewriting of Article 2. It's at the heart of the law's philosophy. More rights for employees when it comes to negotiation within the company and training opportunities. Opportunities that will last throughout a worker's lifetime. Those are elements which are just too important.
Pour la formation notamment tout au long de la vie, ça ce sont des éléments très importants.
This morning I heard Manuel Valls say that he was not going to give in, and I also heard one of his ministers say that he'd be willing to review Article 2. The way I see it, there seem to be quite a few discussions going on within the government.
Aaron Zaleski, what's your take on this week's events?
It's just really a disaster in a lot of ways. I mean, as people were mentioning earlier, I think the timing, even though the bill may not necessarily be this, second coming of the devil, as the CGT seems to think, the timing was so incredibly bad for Hollande that I don't think there's any way to win people back at this point.
And they have him over a barrel with Euro 2016 around the corner?
Exactly. I mean, I don't... If he were... For starters, people are very protective over their labor contract rights. And everyone agrees that reforms need to happen. There's a 10% or 11% unemployment rate here. So I think people agree that change is necessary, but they're still resistant to it. And if he had been hoping to get anywhere with it, I think it would have been a better bet to introduce this bill earlier on in his presidency, before his approval ratings were just on the ground. And I just don't see anything positive is going to come from this.
All right, on Thursday, Philippe Martinez, who you just heard there, the head of that communist-aligned CGT trade union, put out a statement on the strikes. His powerful printers union asked all the newspapers to publish it. The only one that did was the only one that was allowed to hit the stands on Thursday, communist newspaper L'Humanité. And Sylvain Chassani, is that standard fare in France?
To try to impose a press release is I think unheard of. I've never heard of this. You've had strikes and so on, so preventing the printing of newspaper, but not this kind of blackmailing attitude. So I think it's quite outrageous. But who reads newspaper anymore? That's great advertising for online content. It's in a way a bit ironic. They're they're shooting themselves in the foot. But that's a reminder of their influence, still lingering influence, the CGT's influence, and power of nuisance over the economy. Because I agree, they're tiny, if you look at the numbers, but they are hurting. They are, hitting where it hurts.
Yeah, they're based in central parts of
Yes.
the economy. That's right. I would like to add one thing. It's not only an economic battle. We've been describing, the economical, Article 2 and how this is going to influence the standard achievements of the working class in France. Behind it is also a very powerful fight of the CGT to keep its role, because it's been losing to the more moderate CFTC. And so it's strong in the branches. It's still strong in the branches. It's not as strong on the lower level firms right inside where economic life is taking place. So for Martinez to radicalize the CGT is also an attempt to keep up the strength of his weakening union. It's a battle for survival.
A battle for survival, a death battle, you might say, and the president himself took aim at the head of the CGT. François Hollande speaking from the G7 summit in Japan.
We just cannot let a workers' union with a history like their own dictate what the law should or should not be.
It really sounds like there can only be one winner in this battle.
Yeah, I know. But, knowing François Hollande, he said he would go until the end, but you never know with him, He's always, he's a man of compromise.
Let me ask you, Maeve, because it's sort of stolen the thunder of the violent demonstrations we saw in Brussels earlier this week against a labour reform bill north of the border.
Indeed, yeah, we've had similar situation in Brussels this week, and in fact, I almost didn't make my trip to Strasbourg that last weekend because of strikes, and again today because of strikes. We'd have similar images, and we even saw a policeman gravely injured earlier this week during this protest. But again, we see very dramatic images on TV. That's not really the reality there. It's a small minority striking, and there's always a few that come and ruin it for the rest by making it violent. People who come and start.
Is it the same kind of process where you have those who want to keep the system the way it is and those who want to change it?
It's all about the change of government since 2014, since we got a new government, the government of Charles Michel. It's a more right-wing government with the Flemish separatists there, and of course the Christian Democrats from the Flemish, and then the Liberals from both the Wallonians and the French. But there's no representation of the Socialists, who were in Belgium, of course, ruling for more than 20 years. So that today, what we've seen in Brussels this week, we're just seeing the French out. We're not the Wallonians out. We're not seeing the Flems. The Flems don't want to strike. They want to just get on with it.
Mm-hmm.
I think we started off with talking about public reaction and public image. I think Hollande might be banking on one thing, that the strike, which is going to hit the trains, the air traffic, which is struck by the gas stations every France.
Next week it's mass transit in
Paris. So it might be he's banking for a change in attitude of the French.
He's been banking on that for 4 years.
No, but I mean now the strike is hitting at the average French, and at least the very strong union of employers has already come out and said, watch it, you're hurting the economy, which is just showing very small signs of a recovery.
I don't think it's going to.
How much is this all costing?
I've heard young French people say, "Oh, the strike. This isn't the workers' fault. This is the government's fault."
I completely disagree.
The government,
I think the government is going to take the blame.
But I've never seen such a striking culture as I have in France and Belgium. It's incredible.
We've gotten a lot of reactions, by the way. One, what's wrong with a good old-fashioned compromise? I'm very disappointed in Prime Minister Valls and his digging in his heels just on a simple principle. But of course, it's more than just a simple principle, isn't it?
Manuel Valls is he's taking a lot of risk in this with this law. He's fronted the law. He made a point of really putting it together and presenting it and defending it. So he's got a lot of skin in the game. And if by any chance Hollande is pressuring him to withdraw or tweak or whatever, I think that he could even be tempted to leave the government. I think it's been, there've been rumors, and I know that some of his advisors saying, okay, you've been cornered. You're getting as unpopular as President Hollande. You should leave the government. So I think that could be, but I doubt it's going to happen. I doubt that.
All right, but something's going to give before France play Romania on June the 10th, opening match of Euro 2016. Now, while riot police were breaking up picket lines near Marseille Wednesday, back in the capital, tax authorities paying a pre-dawn call on the French offices of Google. Back in January, the US tech giant agreed to pay £130 million to Britain's inland revenue. The French, well, they want up to 1.6 billion, that's billion, euros in back taxes. They're fed up with Google making money in France and declaring it, Maeve, guess in which country?
In Ireland, yeah. Yeah.
What's been the reaction in Ireland to this story?
Well, the Irish government are very, very sensitive about this topic. This is something very close to their hearts, and of course they have the sweetheart deals around for the last 20 years. And also they have their very low corporation tax of 12.5% compared to 33% in Belgium, where I live now. So this is a really tense, sensitive topic for them. They really want to keep those big kind of Google and .com companies all in Dublin. They don't like people going after them. But as you can see, there's so much outrage on the streets there. And I think this whole naming and shaming and going into Google's headquarters, I mean, why not? I think they should pay their tax just like we all do here.
Aaron Zaleski?
This has been, the thing is, I mean, I know it's a company like Google, so it's going to make a lot of headlines, but this has been going on for a long time. I mean, as long as there have been tax loopholes, multinational companies are going to, and sometimes even individuals, are going to take advantage of them. I've met people who live and work in France but have a second residence in Luxembourg, and they declare their residence in Luxembourg because they don't want to pay French taxes. So this is, it's nothing new. I mean, McDonald's, I believe, was raided recently as well.
Yeah, they announced it this week.
Right.
It happened earlier in the month of May.
And that they were apparently funneling their profits to Luxembourg also. So I think if any change is going to happen, I mean, I know the raids look very dramatic. I think there needs to be reform on the level that these multinationals there needs to be more transparency. People need to declare their profits and their taxes.
And we've seen the beginning of that. Facebook in the UK announcing that it was going to declare more of the revenue that, of course, it makes over there.
Yeah, well, the principle is simple. You know, you pay the taxes where you make the profits. And the whole idea of optimizing, tax payment is that you shovel those back and forth between the countries where, like Ireland, you have the least corporate taxes. So it is certainly immoral. Google says it's not unlegal, but I think in Brussels the time is running out, and there is a feeling in Brussels that we should to do something, as Aaron said, on the level of Europe. Only then you can come to grips with that problem.
And Sylvain Chassagny, do you get the sense after the LuxLeaks revelations of 2014, where they found those 343 corporations that had sweetheart deals in Luxembourg, do you get the sense that things are moving?
I think so, yes. Even with the Panama Papers and so on, I think, things are definitely, the public opinion is pushing head of states to move on this subject. Definitely. Google is Michel Sapin made it clear that it was not, that France would not settle. And, it's not a question of arguing,
Because the British press this week and the opposition Labour Party saying that £130 million settlement was the equivalent of a 3% tax rate.
I know. I mean, it's France, I think, is looking at a number at 1.6 billion, in taxes owed. Then you have to add the fine, I think. So, and Michel Sapin, the finance minister, has clearly said, either you owe taxes or you don't, and there are just the rules, and whether you apply, whether you follow them or not. It's not a question of settling or arguing or discussing.
On the day the raid happened, the boss of Google was at a startup conference in Amsterdam. Eric Schmidt didn't comment on the French raid, but he did chastise EU leaders for, in his words, failing to invest public money to support digital innovation and startups.
What happens when I meet with governments is they all say yes, and they listen very politely. They're always very nice. Europeans are always very polite. And then they don't do anything about it. So if you want to do something, I'm serious, right? There is a model for entrepreneurship. It requires risk capital, serious investments in the universities, and then sort of tolerating the crazy ideas of the young people coming out of it, giving them some seed funding and letting them do it. Right, and getting out of their way. That model works. It's produced this extraordinary wealth in America. It is repeatable in Europe.
And by the way, this week the French government announced that it was lowering its money for research and development in the higher education. There seems to be this talk at cross purposes. On the one hand, the French are saying pay your taxes, and the Americans are saying you don't understand the internet.
And I guess, Eric Schmidt's point is totally valid. Totally valid. Those are two different subjects. You have to pay your tax. Everybody pays taxes. But he's right in saying that Europe is not, he's not really putting as much effort into entrepreneurship and capital, venture capital. That's correct.
Aaron Zaleski?
Yeah, I mean, that's an argument that's pretty common in the U.S., that Europeans don't hold entrepreneurship to the same esteem that the U.S. does, and they can't really understand. It's sort of divide between the U.S. and France and also other European countries. Not so much that the Nordics seem to be striking a balance, and that they still have I'm sure that there's tax evasion there as well, but they usually make the transparency indexes least corrupt nations. They're still having growth and they're still enjoying legal protections on the job. So they seem to be striking a balance a little bit more.
I think Erin has a very important point. I mean, just in France, we talked about the upheaval in France. To say patron is, it's a dirty word. Entrepreneur is such, and factory owner. Ooh, it sounds terrible. People get, almost a Pavlov reflex of antipathy to that kind of. So Schmidt has a point when he says, the old Europe, the old continent, should do something about getting more flexible and more supportive of young entrepreneurs.
And about changing the culture as well. We have to stop thinking like it's the 80s or the 90s where we're going to be in one job for life. Things are different now. You can create your own job, you can start it, but there's a massive fear, I feel, in Europe. That's why we don't have as many Mark Zuckerbergs around here, which we need, especially at a time like now, when there's such high unemployment in countries like Croatia and Greece and Italy. People can go out there and try and start up their job, but it's not easy as well when you have countries like Belgium, where you have to pay for 500 euros, for example, to start up your own company. When in countries like Ireland, you can just pay 100 euros and off you go.
And in a globalized world, what has Europe other than brain power?
Absolutely.
We'll leave it there. Stefan Siemens, many thanks for your brain power today. Erin Zaleski. I also want to thank Ensid Van Chessen and Maeve McMahon. Stay with us, though. Our Media Watch segment is next. And we say hello to Emma James.
Hi there.
You've been paying attention to something that has been buzzing, and that is a campaign against, we were talking earlier about the Austrian elections, the impact of the far right in Europe, a campaign against Islamophobia.
Yes, this one's in the US in particular, where it really has been a growing problem with the rhetoric in the US presidential campaign. Just one of the things, really, that seems to be pushing it into the forefront in the US. And what the Council on American Islamic Relations has done is produced a video, a mock commercial for a supposed medication called Islamophobin. It's kind of like nicotine gum, but instead of taking away your cravings for a cigarette, it takes away your ignorance and your irrational fears. Let's take a look at the video.
It works.
Do you think your neighbor is a terrorist?
Hey, how you doing? Hey! Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar!
Does your fear of Muslims get in the way of living a normal life?
No! He's coming!
No! Did you call an Uber?
We're fine.
Yeah, we'll take the next one. It's fine.
All right.
We're okay. You saw the app.
I didn't know. It said Mo. I didn't know.
Do you judge people by their outer appearance? Introducing Islamophobin, now in an easy and convenient chewing gum. Starts working within 5 minutes to relieve bigotry and intolerance. Call your doctor if your Islamophobia worsens or you have hallucinations that discrimination isn't real. Side effects include fondness, brotherhood, acceptance, loss of bigotry, increase in rationality, and possible denouncement of superiority.
I didn't realize I had a problem, but admitting is the first step.
Islamophobia worked for me. Ask your doctor if it's right for you.
It is just brilliant. It was released just 2 days ago, but on the Facebook page that's been placed on, it's already had 2.7 million views. That's just in one place. It really is spreading far and wide. Now, what CARE's Ibrahim Hooper has said about this is that they hope humour can help create public awareness about the rising level of anti-Muslim bigotry that has unfortunately been mainstreamed by public figures like Donald Trump, Ben Carson and others. And if we take a look around, I mean, they've also created this. On Amazon, you can actually buy Islamophobin gum. They do point out that this gum doesn't actually cure anything. It is just sugar-free gum. But you can genuinely buy it on Amazon.com.
Okay, so it's not FDA approved, but...
No, not just yet. Mediaite has a blog looking at this one, asking, will it work? And they point out that normally CARE is very serious-minded in its reaction to things that happen. And really, they point out this is a new weapon, the choice to use comedy. And they think that it might actually help to chip away at Islamophobia. One of the interesting things is they haven't chosen to go for sort of rabid, extreme examples of Islamophobia. It's very everyday stuff where it's just that nagging doubt that a lot of people won't think of maybe as Islamophobia, but it can grow and it can turn into something much more pernicious. And I think that's the idea. They want to tackle that sort of small-scale Islamophobia in the hope that that will spread wider and maybe tackle the big-scale Islamophobia. Taking a look at the sort of reactions to these things, some people really like it. 4 out of 5 doctors say that Islamophobia may result in peaceful coexistence. But there are the haters too. Not this one. Comedy is art, and art has an influence on how we view the world. Bravo. But there are people who've really taken over this hashtag Islamophobia and are tweeting really very hateful things, talking about when they stop raping women and beheading people, then I'll stop being an Islamophobe. So it hasn't completely worked in terms of creating a positive image just yet. But as Mediarite put it, maybe it will chip away a little bit.
We've just seen this is the week where, according to the Associated Press's tally, Donald Trump has secured the nomination for the Republicans. Is identity politics going to be the big issue in the fall?
I think that's going to be part of it. I think it's going to be. I don't think it's going to be the main issue. I think the economy is going to play into that as well as the whole nostalgia factor. But it will definitely play a huge role, I think.
All right, we're going to leave it there. I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you, Emma, and thank you for joining us here in The World This Week.